Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. For today's video, we are going to be breaking down what I feel is one of the most undervalued and slept on chains going over into this next cycle. Now inside of these bull runs, I've had the opportunity of being early to a number of different narratives, and this is one that I think is going to be playing out in a big way. Most people are not positioned inside, so for today's video, I'm going to break down 5 of my favorite tokens inside of this ecosystem, ones that are pretty undervalued that are going to be looking at a pretty significant rise in price long term, and how we can look to be early and capitalize on the coming moves ahead. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and with that being said, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Here we are breaking down the ecosystem that I think is going to be giving us some of the biggest gains inside of this bull market. When we're talking about what gives us the biggest returns, I've always found that it's layer 1s and layer 2s. Anything that gives us the opportunity for other projects to build on, for other communities to grow inside, it always benefits the main holders of the token itself. And I do think that this is what's going to be taking place as we have the launch of PulseChain for this coming cycle. So when we're looking at things, we need to start out with Ethereum HEX. This is HEX that was built on Ethereum because there's 2 versions. With the launch of PulseChain, there is now a duplicated version of HEX on the PulseChain network. So we have 2 different versions of this, and we really saw the price start to sell off a lot once that airdrop actually took place. eHEX ended up going for a lower low, but when we zoom out and look at a higher time frame, we can actually see that this correction, although it was pretty massive, came and pretty much followed classic Elliott wave theory rules, and we're going to talk a little bit about what I mean right now. When we're looking at Elliott wave theory, we need to understand a little bit about where the corrective waves generally will bottom, and when we're looking at this, we can see that inside of this ABC correction, it generally comes and bottoms right around the point of our wave 4 correction during our impulse, right? So when we're looking at HEX, right now we can see that the bottom of our correction took us to that exact same moment of time. So when we look at where we bottomed here, it was pretty much right there flush inside of that wave 4 correction. So when we're looking at this, HEX pretty much followed your classic example of an Elliott wave cycle. In fact, it held really high support, whereas a lot of times they'll actually peak all the way back down and cross below wave 4. So when we're looking at this, I still think that HEX is going to end up having a new cycle, and it's going to still end up performing relatively well, considering when we're looking at where our next resistance level is, it's all the way up here at just under 2 cents, I guess you could say. So if we're looking at where this thing's going in the short term, I think it's going to go at least a 2x, and it very easily could end up running all the way back up near the point of where the PulseChain airdrop actually took place, where we do something like this, fall back down to reclaim that level as new support again before continuing in this cycle. Do not be the least bit surprised to see this market make a rebound and start to come back and actually give some really good returns as we're at this very low level in its market cycle. I don't think it's dead by any means. And if we come over here and take a look at the Pulse version of HEX, this is the airdropped version that everybody got, right? Because what happened with PulseChain was the launch, every single token that you held on an ERC20 wallet, you actually got a duplicated version inside of the PulseChain network that you could have converted back into Pulse tokens. And so if you're looking at that, I think it's an important thing to understand that when we're looking at how this thing's going to develop, there are 2 different charts, there's 2 different cycles, there's 2 different coins, but they are still the same coin ultimately. The charts do look a little bit different. When we come in here and look at the eHEX chart, it does look a little bit different, but it is following roughly the same thing. The only difference is this only goes from basically here when we're looking at the pHEX version. So as we're looking at this, all this is really done is broken out of all of our descending resistance of this bear market. We finished this ABC correction when we broke out right here inside of this move. And now we're kind of just coming back down and retesting trending support. Big picture, we're about to be breaking out of this descending resistance, and at least that's what we're working on right now. Once the short-term price breaks out and gets outside of this descending resistance, I think that this thing's going to be going all the way back up to the top of this B wave, basically being 2.5 cents. Overall, big picture, I think that this will go into a brand new cycle. And when we're comparing what, the average retail investor might want to invest in more, the difference between these, even though it's the same token and it's just a duplicated version inside of the PulseChain network, there's no prior market cycle to look at. So any new guy that's jumping into this might not look at that as such a bearish thing, where when some new guy gets involved with HEX and they're buying all the way down here, all they see is this absolutely massive crash, right? So the smart money is obviously accumulating during this crash, But the average retail investor sees all of this massive bear market and it scares them out from buying certain projects. So when we're looking at HEX, it doesn't have that big scary market cycle on the PulseChain version. So that's kind of why my thoughts why it maybe will outperform the Ethereum version. I'm not 100% sure, but it will be interesting to see how the two line up. Overall, it is just the duplicated version, and it's ultimately decided on what the community of the PulseChain people, all the investors inside of that network, it's just up for them to decide which one holds more value long term. Now, when we're looking at the next one on today's list, you can't go wrong talking about PulseX, because this is going to be the swap platform or the DEX inside of the PulseChain network. So if you're looking at what ecosystem projects do the best, it's always the swap platforms. We just talked a lot about Metis and how we had a lot of those different altcoins we covered, and NetSwap actually has done a 6.5x from where we talked about it in that signal in my Discord. So when we're looking at DEXs, generally they get a lot of volume quickly. So when I'm looking at this chart, it actually does look a lot better than the price of HEX. This has really clear to identify impulse waves, whereas the price of HEX has corrective type structure. This doesn't look very impulsive. It looks more corrective. Even though I still think it's going to be bullish and break bullish, I think that this is a little bit more directly impulsive rather than the price of HEX. So when we're looking at the two, all we finished is a wave 1 impulse. So when we're looking at Elliott waves, we need to look at Fibonacci to give us targets, and we have a minimum target of the 1618. So I think that we're going to a minimum up here at this level. But oftentimes inside of a wave 3, you're going to see it extend all the way up, sometimes to the 2618. Sometimes it even goes higher than that, just depending on the market cycle and the hype. Considering the fact this has $2.5 billion in market cap, I think it's a little bit more likely that we just rally in between the 1618 or maybe coming all the way up to the 2618. But those would be the three main targets on this way back up. So if we're looking at where we're at right now today, you're looking at about a 1x, 1.5x to about a 2x return inside of those profit taking levels. Overall, this is a better long-term hold than it is trying to swing trade it, in my opinion, because all this is a wave 1, and we're getting ready for a much bigger impulse right here, and that's what I think is about to happen. We'll probably see a correction after that move. We'll probably come back down and retest this market structure, fully cemented in as new support, before we get an even further impulse completing out our wave 5. Big picture, all this is going to be doing is building a new parabolic curve as we accumulate until this thing finally goes into a new all-time high. These are just short-term impulses. I'm not really trying to say that it's just going to go to this level here and then die. I'm just trying to help you guys visualize the way that the whole market cycle is going to take foot. This could get more impulsive than even I'm drawing. That tends to happen in crypto too. But just because it's got a relatively higher market cap than some projects, I think that it might be a little bit more realistic to just target these levels moving forward. But big picture, this just looks like it's going to outperform the price of HEX on the upside as well as the downside. So far we see that, but it's got amazing volume in here, very, very consistent Elliott wave structure. I love to see good Elliott waves because it does show that there's a lot of money coming into the market, and this is just nearing the point of us actually breaking out, considering the fact the difference between HEX and PulseX is this is actually already broken short-term descending resistance. So this is a bullish move. I think it's going to be sending it into a new height very soon. Watch out for this one. Now we need to come over here and talk about Pulse itself. This is the token of PulseChain, and this is the one that I personally sacrificed for going into a couple years ago. So when we're talking about this, I really think that layer 1s and layer 2s are always going to be solid investments, considering you have entire networks that can be built inside of them. All of DeFi can come and build on these networks, and we see that the token itself, the native token, oftentimes benefits the most because of it. So far, all this thing has really done is made this big ABC correction. A, B, and C. But we did finish that inside of this most recent move. We've broken from all descending resistance, which took place right here, and this also has very clear Elliott wave structure when we're comparing it to maybe how PulseX looks. So in the two, they all have very clear market structure. We got 5 waves up, and we did finish an ABC correction back down. Came back down, retested trending support, and this one is also broken from its short-term descending resistance as well. So big picture, this thing has done everything we want to see. We had declining volume and we had declining price throughout this correction. That is a bullish continuation type of setup. That's a confirmation based off the volume that you're going to see price start to go up even higher and continue on in the direction it's already been. We've been building this new sort of parabolic curve. And I do think that the next resistance is going to be taking us all the way back up to more or less the level that we sold from when we had the SEC lawsuit. So remember, we can look at Fibonacci as a way to kind of give us a target. So our minimum target is going to be the 1618, which, like I said, takes us all the way back up to that prior level. This was our old support before we got the lawsuit. So when we're looking at this from where we're at currently in price, you're basically looking at about an 80% gain. So maybe not quite as good as what we would see inside of PulseX, but nonetheless, if this is the native, token of the ecosystem, I don't really think you can go wrong. And it really only has a 500 million, and these are all fully diluted market caps as well. PulseX also has a fully diluted value of 2.5 billion. So even though it's got a little bit higher of a market cap, it's still not that high compared to the fact that some of these cryptos have, fully diluted valuations that are insanely overvalued. So there's still a lot of tokens that are going to be waiting to be inflated, whether that's VCs, venture capitalists that were early to the project that are going to realize their gains by dumping, or, whether it's more similar to how Arbitrum does it through grants and distributing it back into the early projects. I don't know 100%, but what we do know is having a fully diluted valuation means that all the tokens are already there in the supply. There's not going to be any added sell pressure, and I think that that's a very bullish sign long term, especially when you have the burn function taking place inside of PulseX. So looking at PulseChain, I think it's more or less going to follow PulseX, because they have the same market structure. They're both following each other the most. And what comes next is probably a run up to the 1618, but I think that this is probably going to run even higher, maybe potentially coming all the way up to the 2618, being the prior all-time high of that cycle. That'd be about a 1.5x. Overall, this is going to follow the same sort of consistency where we're just building that new parabolic trend to begin the cycle. And that's what I think is going to be playing out right here. The difference is we're about to be starting that next leg up, considering we just broke out on the shorter time frames. So now is the time to be paying attention. Now, if you're trying to talk about maybe something with a little bit more risk, I gave you what I think are going to be the four shores if PulseChain ends up performing well like I think it is. So if we're talking about what maybe is a little bit more risk on, I don't think you can look any further than the number one meme coin inside of this network, and that's Teddy Bear. Now, when Richard Hart used to do a lot more live streams, he used to have this little teddy bear that was in the background of his videos, and it's become almost like the meme of this network. So I do think that you could go and hold this, and it will perform relatively well, considering I do think that we're going to have a lot of upside inside of this market as a whole. At only $12 million fully diluted, the upside potential is still pretty high. We had a significant amount of volume coming in at the breakout of this descending resistance. We've successfully retested this mid-range, and as of right now, this just looks like some type of, pennant or triangle type consolidation, whatever you want to call it. And I do think that this will lead to an eventual breakout to the upside. Looking at a new all-time high breakout, probably coming in the next leg up, doing something along the lines of this. Overall, the amount of volume that came in just in this leg up should already confirm that we're about to see a significant reversal. So I think that this is going to be one of those really solid meme coins, if not the very best one that you can actually buy inside of this network. So watch out for Teddy Bear. Now, last up today is going to be Fame or Famous. Now, this is a token where I actually had the founders on my channel before this ever launched, interviewed them, talked a little bit about what they're doing. More or less, it's the GMX of PulseChain. So I've been a big believer in GMX. It's one of my biggest investments going into this next cycle. You guys know I'm big on Arbitrum as a whole. This is basically that token, but over here on PulseChain. So I think it could actually perform relatively well. All we're really doing right now is retesting our main support, and that's why I think it's a pretty good time to be getting in right here. All this is our main support that we've had. So you're either looking at us failing support and going into a new low, which I mean is possible if Bitcoin corrected, but considering the market looks pretty bullish, I'd find it a little bit more likely that this thing breaks out. We're seeing these other markets breaking out in PulseChain. Pulse is breaking out, PulseX is breaking out. So I do believe that that's an early sign that some of these other ecosystem tokens are going to do the same thing. If it's sitting on support, I don't think you should be selling it by any means. I think it's more likely that we end up bottoming here and reversing. So 15 million fully diluted valuation. That's really solid. And that's the thing I like about all these tokens is they're fully diluted valuations. There's already all the tokens in the supply. You don't have to worry about all of the added sell pressure except for just the people that were in early. So when we're comparing all of these are the ones that I think could perform relatively well. These are ones that I'm invested in personally. When we're talking about what could potentially blow up big picture, There's all kinds of chains that are going to be profiting. So far, we've talked a lot about Arbitrum. We've talked about Optimism. We've talked about Metis. All of those have done very, very well for us to begin this new cycle. And I think that this is an ecosystem that most people are 100% writing off. One that's going to perform really well in the same way that we saw Hex do so well in the last cycle. And there's multiple different tokens in this ecosystem that you can choose from that I still think are going to be providing really good gains. This is the point of the cycle where we're going to see a lot of rotation coming from Bitcoin into these altcoins. We're seeing the markets taking off like crazy. I can bet you anything that there's going to be so much more money to be made this cycle than ever before. So be early, be ready. These are the type of narratives that blow up, and the only way you can be early to these narratives is simply buying now. So with that being said, if you found value, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. If you guys do want to join the Discord server, see how I'm investing over the cycle, see how I've given signals over every single one of these coins. The only way you're ever going to know what I'm doing with my portfolio truly is either me talking about little things on YouTube or me actually talking about it in depth and in person inside of the Discord. So if you do want to be able to check that out, links are in the description to sign up on my website. From my website, you're going to be able to get total access inside of my Discord. So make sure you guys go. Links are in the description. Thank you all so much. And with that being said, I will catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.